Good morning. It is a new year, and so we thought for a new year we would start a new series this year. It starts today. It's going to go through the whole month of January, so you're here at the right time. The series itself is called Lead. Okay, that's the name of the series, and let me tell you where it kind of came from a little bit. This book, it's called H3 Leadership. We're going to take some of the ideas from this book and go through them over the next month. In fact, next Sunday, you can pick up a copy of this book if you'd like. We'll have some in the lobby here. This book was written by Brad Lomanek. Let me tell you real quick about him, and he'll be here in January one morning speaking with us. He is the founder of Catalyst. Catalyst is a nationwide conference for leaders. It's impacted literally thousands, probably into certainly the tens, maybe the hundreds of thousands of leaders. And he started that thing, founded it, and ran it for a whole bunch of years. And so every year he'd sit down, there'd be a new group of interns that would come in that were a part of creating Catalyst for the next year. And they would ask him this question in one of their first meetings. They would say, what do we need to do to become the kind of leader you're describing? And he would say, remember three words: humble, hungry, and hustle. And that's obviously, as you can see, the title of this book. Here's why this matters to you. Here's why it's important for you. Leaders are influencers. And all of us here in the room, we influence someone or someones in various ways. Whether that's a spouse, kids, family, people at work, people, whether they're under us, over us, our neighbors, our friends, maybe even our enemies, we influence someone, probably lots of people. So we're all leaders in that way. And that's why this is important for all of us to really think about and see how we can develop a habit of becoming people that are more humble, a habit of becoming people that are hungry and hustle. This morning, here's what I want to do. I want to focus specifically on calling, on the idea of being called to lead or called to influence other people. So calling is where we'll go this morning. And here's why. Leaders, some of the leaders who have the biggest or greatest influence on other people are also some of the leaders that have the strongest sense of calling. Okay, some of the people that are the greatest leaders with the biggest impact also have the strongest, clearest sense of calling. You see how calling and leadership goes together, and so we're focused on calling this morning. When I say calling, I don't necessarily mean, it says on the screen, they're like, a title. We're not talking about a title or a position that you have or a job or a career or a paycheck or any of those types of things. When I talk about the word calling and who you're called to influence, I'm talking about more of a vision for your life of who we'll see this morning that God wants us to influence and lead, a vision or a purpose of who God is calling you to lead. Some years ago, my wife and I, we felt called to do foster care. And that wasn't about career change or jobs. It wasn't about any of that. It wasn't about titles. It was about saying, God, we believe that you're calling us. You've given us this vision to influence, to care for other children other than our own. And so we started down the road of foster care. And this morning, we're going to look specifically at Moses, at his calling of when God called him to lead and to influence other people. And Moses, just real quick, just a reminder, Moses, he was that guy that God said, Moses, I'm calling you to go to Egypt and take my people, the Israelites, and lead them out of Egypt. That's what I'm calling you to. So turn over to Exodus 3. I want us to read together this calling that God gave him specifically for this. It's Exodus 3, starting at verse 1. Exodus is pretty easy to find right after Genesis in the front of your Bible. So if you have on your phone, make it maybe even quicker. Exodus 3, verse 1. And let's read together. I'll read it for you. Moses calling. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then he said, come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place you are standing on is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Verse 7, then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings. And I've come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. Now here it is, verse 10. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. God calls Moses. Now, you would think that with a calling like this, that is this clear, there'd be no question about it, right? I mean, here there's a bush on fire, but it's not being consumed. His voice comes out of a burning bush and says everything we just read and says, so Moses, you're my guy. I'm sending you to go to this place. I mean, you would think with it being that clear, there'd be no question in Moses' mind about what's this going to look like? Am I really the guy? Oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this. There'd be none of that. This is the type of calling or the way in which I wish that God called me, right? I'm guessing it's probably the way in which God called you, something this cool and clear as you're just kind of walking, mind your own business, boom, bush is on fire, and God starts telling you what he wants you to do. Right? This is the way that we want to be called by God. Because we know if we did, it would just be super clear. But sometimes instead, it's not this clear for us, is it? We're like normal people. Moses is on some other sort of planet place, and we're normal people, and God doesn't talk through burning bushes to us. And so usually we're kind of like, man, God, are you wanting me? Are you calling? Did you say? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just being influenced by some other things or some other people. Maybe it's not your voice. Maybe it's their voice. And we start asking some questions. No, I don't think I'm ready for this. This couldn't be. We start coming up with reasons of why there's no way God could be calling us to this. And we kind of come up with some excuses or whatever, and we talk our way out of it. And we end up being much more confused than called. Much more like, God, I'm not really sure what you're saying here. And who knows? Maybe you're not even talking. Maybe I'm missing that. You're not even talking to me. Here's the thing. Moses, even though he has this clear calling that we all wish we could have, because then we'd have no questions. Then we would have no excuses. We would have no problems at all. Moses actually finds up exactly in the same place that we find ourselves. Questioning God, saying, I'm not sure. I think maybe you're looking in the wrong place, God. You knocked on the wrong door. So Moses, too, feels overwhelmed and confused. And here's what I want to look at this morning. Here's the whole point, is that I want us to see how we can move from a place of being overwhelmed, maybe a bit scared, maybe a bit feeling like we're not qualified to do this job, and maybe where we're even saying, God, is that really you? Are you even talking to me? And move to a place over here, like we'll see Moses do, where we say, okay, God, I'll accept this thing you're calling me to. I'll accept it, and I'll pursue after it. I'll give it everything I have, and I'll even see it through to completion. I'll even see it fulfilled, God, because I know that this is what you're calling me to. And I hope that we move from that place of confusion to really having this clear calling. And maybe you already know what God's called you to, and maybe you're doing it right now, and that's awesome. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe this new year, 2016, maybe God's going to call you to something brand new that you've never thought of before, that you don't even see coming. But whatever that is, I hope we move from place to place. So let's begin by looking at his response. Exodus 3, verse 11, Moses responds with this. After God made it pretty clear what he wanted him to do, he says, but Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites up out of Egypt? Who am I? In other words, he's saying, God, I think you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy. Let me tell you a little backstory real quick on Moses, on who he is and where he kind of came from, his backstory. There was a time when those Israelites, they were slaves in Egypt, like we said, and they grew so big. And Pharaoh, he's the king over Egypt. He's the head honcho. He saw how big the Hebrew people, the Israelites, that's the same people we're talking about there, how big they'd become. And so he said, hey, I have an idea of how to keep things under control and all that. Every woman who has a baby boy born, you take that baby boy, you go drown it in the river and kill it. So he was a psychopath. The guy's ruthless, he's deranged, he's all that, okay? It's pretty hardcore. So take and go kill those babies in the river. Well, Moses was one of those Hebrew babies born during the time when they were supposed to be taken down and killed. So his mother has an idea after he's just this little, few weeks old. She has this idea. She says, you know what, I don't know, I'm not going to kill my baby. I think that's not on my to-do list to do. So even though that's what the head guy's saying, I don't know, crazy thought, I don't want to kill my kid. So instead, she takes him down and she hides him in the river, kind of like in the reeds there, kind of hides him. Maybe it looks like I'm just normal Hebrew mom walking down to kill my kid like every other mom. And then boop, I'm going to hide him in here and nobody sees. Well, Pharaoh's daughter walks down to take a bath in the river. She has lots of servants with her because she's obviously is Pharaoh's daughter. She's pretty high up the chain, right? Lots of servants with her. One of those servants looks and sees this baby over hiding in the reeds and says, this is one of those Hebrew boys that's supposed to be killed. Takes it over and Pharaoh's daughter says, get this, Pharaoh's daughter says, my dad is psycho, so instead of killing the kid like my dad told them to do, I'm going to go ahead and adopt this child and raise him as my own. So that's what she does. And so Moses spends 40 years growing up in Egypt, not just growing up in Egypt, but growing up as Pharaoh's daughter's, adopted son, meaning he's got a lot at his disposal. He's well taken care of. All the Egyptian culture and education and wealth is all at his disposal. It's all at his hands. And he grows up with all that. But he's a Hebrew, right? He's a Hebrew. So one day, when he's about 40 years old, he goes out in the field. He sees an Egyptian beating up a Hebrew slave. Not probably a normal sight, probably happened a lot, not a big deal. But this day, he just had enough. He looks around, doesn't see anybody. He starts beating the Egyptian, and he kills him. And he realizes, oh man, I've really kind of screwed things up. So he takes off running for his life. So now this Hebrew, who's kind of an Egyptian by culturally he's an Egyptian, by blood he's a Hebrew, now he's a fugitive on the run for murder, goes to a well, and some women are at the well, and they've got some sheep, and they're trying to get water from the well to feed their sheep, and some other shepherds show up, and they start picking on these women, and Moses comes up, and he's like, what are you guys doing? Get out of here. And he kind of shoos them off, and, because shepherds, they only pick on women. They're kind of weak. So and once Moses shows up, they're like, okay, we're out. So they take off. These girls go home. They're Midianites. They go home, and they tell their dad, we're at this well. These shepherds, they're giving us all kinds of problems. This Egyptian, they call him an Egyptian, by the way. This Egyptian shows up and saves us. Dad says, man, thank you. I appreciate that. Can I give you something as a thank you? And Moses says, yeah, sure. He says, here, have one of my daughters. So pretty nice. Thank you present there. Have a kid. And so he marries one of the daughters and spends the next 40 years in Midian, who they worship the god Baal. But during this time, he's in the wilderness, learning the ways of a shepherd, learning how to travel around from place to place, okay? And then God comes to him after that. So Moses is 80 years old when he comes to him. But here's the thing. Moses says, who am I? Who am I? Right? You got the wrong guy. God, I know I know who you're looking for. You're looking for this guy. His name's Bob. He's 2 doors down. He's the guy who runs Ironmans on the weekends. He can read you the Bible in like a few different languages from memory, and he started his own big old business. He's got thousands of employees or hundreds or something that he leads. He's a multimillionaire. He's the guy you're looking for this job. God, who am I? Who am I? You got the wrong guy. He's 2 doors down. His name's Bob. See, I think that Moses had a little bit of what he would call identity confusion, right? Am I a Hebrew? Am I an Egyptian? Am I a fugitive on the run for murder? Or am I a Midianite? I don't know, but I know I'm the wrong guy. I think God looks at that and says, no, you just have like identity well-roundedness or something. You have identity complexity that I'm going to use, and you'll see later how I'm going to do that. So Moses is saying, who am I? God, you got the wrong guy. Have you ever said that to God when you've felt like he's calling you to lead and influence those people in that place, and you're like, no, God, I think you got the wrong guy. You're looking for Bob. And there was another, not to mention the fact that Moses says, who am I that I will go to Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of Egypt? Moses, he knew what he's going up against. He knows that, God, you're telling me to go toe-to-toe with the most powerful man in the world at this time, Pharaoh. He was. And you want me to go to him, and you want me to say to him, hey, most powerful man in the world, all these slaves that you think belong to you, that you own, that are yours, they don't belong to you. They belong to this God over here, and he wants them back. And I'm here, so that's going to go over well, God, thank you. And I'm here to then take them and lead them out of here. He's probably thinking too, they were only 70 people when they started out in Egypt, but they had grown to close to a couple million. That's even with Pharaoh trying to kill off all these babies. They're still close to 2 million. You want me to lead 2 million people out of Egypt? You want me to go toe-to-toe with the most powerful man in the world? God, you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy. Here's the thing. Calling usually does come with a cost, though, doesn't it? It does come with a cost. Don't be surprised. Don't talk yourself out of what God is calling you or who God is calling you to lead or influence just because it comes with a cost. Calling often comes with a cost. When we started into that foster care I was mentioning before, we heard these stories in our training about how it can be difficult. You can have some different challenges. You can have kids that are they can be hard. They can kind of push you in ways that you haven't been pushed before. So they give you all this training to kind of learn how to deal with all that stuff. And so then the time comes, and our first foster kid comes in our home, and all those fears that we had, and all the worries, all the concerns, and all the what if this is too big for us? It was all validated, all of it, every bit of it. It all went sideways on us, and it was just like, oh man, God, maybe you called the wrong guy. God didn't call the wrong guy. He didn't call the wrong guy with us. He didn't call the wrong guy with Moses. He's not calling the wrong guy with you. He knows who Bob is 2 doors down. He knows him. It's just that calling, it comes with a cost. It comes with a cost. But here's the thing. Here's how we can get to a place where we can move from this confusion and overwhelmed and feeling inadequate to this place over here of accepting and taking it on. And this is kind of the key thought for today is when we realize that God he prepares us. He's been preparing us for what he calls us to. And he's with us when he calls us to something. Look at how God prepares Moses. One of the ways is that he trains Moses. Moses spent 40 years in Egypt learning this culture, learning the ways of Egyptian culture, learning what it would look like to even go to Pharaoh and say the things that God wants him to go to Pharaoh and say. 40 years of training there. And then another 40 years in the wilderness of learning how to travel through the wilderness as this nomadic person with no real home and kind of living from place to place, moving from place to place. All essential training that he will need when he does take the Israelites out of Egypt because they will spend some time traveling around with them. See, 40 years is a long time. And then 40 more years is a long time. He's 80 years old when God calls him. So maybe part of God preparing us is we need a bit of patience. We need a bit of patience, but God trains us. I want you to look back on your own life. What experiences have you gone through? What 40 years of training, not literally, okay, but have you gone through? Maybe literally. Maybe it's been 5 years. Maybe it's been whatever. What have you gone through? How has God trained you that has given you some strengths and qualities and skills that other people don't have the exact same way? See, Moses had some unique abilities, some unique strengths that equipped him, that trained him well for this job. What are those in your life? And he also had something else. He had passion. I think when we want to know, God, what are you calling me to? Who do you want me to influence in that? We look at maybe what strengths we have, but we also look at, man, what am I most passionate about? Do you know what you're most passionate about? Moses, he said, we read in Exodus 2, 11 and 12, we read that one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and saw their forced labor. See, he was passionate about his people, and he was passionate about how they were being treated. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsfolks. He looked this way and that way, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian. He hit him in the sand. Now, obviously, what Moses does here out of passion is not good, but what I want us to see is he is passionate. And if we want to know what God calls us to, we often look for not just our strengths or giftings or talents, but we look for, God, what passion have you put on my heart? If you're not sure what you're passionate about, sometimes you could look back on your own life before, when you were a kid, before you had any big pressures or responsibilities, bills to pay, any of that stuff. What did you love doing then? When you were free to create and to dream and to innovate, what drove you? What excited you? Another thing you could do is think about, right now, what is it that kind of gets you out of bed in the morning going? That may be the thing you're most passionate about. What is it that keeps you up at night when you should be going to sleep? That may be the thing you're most passionate about. If you had unlimited resources, what would you do? What would you do with that? And that will probably tap into what you are most passionate about. And when we bring our passion together and our skills and training together, we often find what God is maybe calling us to. My wife has this magazine. It's a women's running magazine that she gets, and she opened it up the other day and saw this article on Susan Loken, who she was surprised to see a little bit because she's local right here in Phoenix. She's 52 years old. Susan has run a number of marathons. She trains people and stuff. Her first marathon she ran, though, her first one, she was 35 years old. 35 years old. But look what she's gone on to do. Look at her skills and gifting that she has. She kept running after that, and she earned an entry to the Olympic trials marathon for the very first time at the age of 40. So she runs her first marathon at 35 and gets an entry to the Olympic trials at the age of 40, and then again at 44, and again at 48. So you see, this woman has incredible talent and gifting and strengths that allows her to do this. And then earlier in this, she says, running is my passion. It's my passion. So you see how her talents, her strengths, and her passion are coming together, and then listen to this. But my purpose, my calling, is to inspire others through the journey. And so she has a whole training thing that she does and trains other people and all of that. Can I give you a recipe this morning for finding God's calling for you? And there's nothing scientific about this, okay, but just kind of check it out with me. Number one, what is your passion? Like we've talked about. Number two, what strengths or gifts do you have? And then third, what are God's values? What's on God's heart that he is concerned with, that he wants to use you to influence and lead other people and to bring about the change that he desires. God prepares us and he trains us. And hopefully when we kind of look at this thing, we start to find maybe what God is uniquely calling us to. And when Moses says, man, who am I? Who am I? I think I'm the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy, God. It tells us one other thing that's important to Moses, that's important for all of us as we become leaders and influencers, something that we'll talk about much more in the weeks to come, and that is humility. It's a statement that just speaks of his humility. In fact, in Numbers 12:3, it says Moses was the most humble person out there on the face of the earth. Moses was the most humble. His humility allowed him to do this, though, with what God was calling him to. So if you can, I'll show you. Take your arms and cross them like this. This is the posture of a prideful person. A person in this position, what are they ready to receive? Not much, not anything. In fact, kind of this posture kind of says, I don't want anything from you. I don't want anything to do with you. They're not ready to receive anything. But go ahead and just kind of open your arms up and kind of go back as you were. See, in this posture, what are we ready to receive now? We're ready to receive what God is calling us to, and who God is calling you to influence and lead. We're ready to receive it when we've been trained in humility like Moses. So some questions on the bottom of your sheet there in your outline, if you're looking there, say, how has God worked in your life to prepare you? When you look back at your life experiences, what you've gone through and all of that, your training ground, how has God trained you? How has he maybe humbled you to prepare you for what he has for you? What do you think God is calling you to do? What do you think he's calling you to do? You know, Moses is far more prepared for this than he realizes, but it's not his preparation that will allow him to fulfill this. His preparation or his training and all of that will maybe allow him to receive this calling. It'll maybe even allow him to pursue it, but it's not going to be the thing that allows him to finish it, to complete it, to do it, to even succeed at it. You know where that will come from? It will come from God saying, Moses, I'm with you in this. I'm with you. Look at verse 12, Exodus 3, verse 12. God responds back to Moses after Moses says, who am I? This is what God says back to him. He says, I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. God says, Moses, I will be with you. See, we can never fulfill what God has called us to, the ways that he wants you to lead and influence people. We can never fulfill that apart from his presence. We can't do it. And the reason for that is because the things that God calls us to lead and influence, the people that he calls us to lead and influence, they're not normal things. They're not easy things. They're not necessarily maybe even sort of earthly things. They're things like, I want you to go and free slaves, Moses. There are things like, I want you to go and love the least of these, maybe is what he's saying to you. There's things like, I want you to take in and care for what everyone else has kind of done away with. There are things like, I'm calling you to be generous and to influence, to give to these people that nobody else is even thinking about. See, they're things that they're big things. They're God-sized things. They're things that are on God's heart that he cares about. And so for us to be successful with that, his presence, him being with us is essential. So now when I pray, when I think God's calling me to something, this is just part of my prayer all the time. God, I think you're calling me to this, God, but if maybe if I'm off, if I'm missing this, if you're not with me in this, God, then I don't want it. I don't want to have anything to do with it because I know I can't fulfill and complete and succeed unless God is with me. I know I can't. So I say, God, are you in this? Are you with me? If so, open up the doors and lead the way. If not, close them down. Close them down because I know it won't work. And so Moses, knowing that God will be with him, asks a very important question. In verse 13, he says, but Moses said to God, so you're with me, but if I come to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? See, Moses, he's already showing that he's the right guy for the job, and he doesn't even know it. See, as someone that grew up in Egyptian culture, for 40 years, he knows that Egypt is a polytheistic country. They worship lots and lots of gods, and every god had a name. Every god had a name, and that name was significant in telling you something about who that god was. The biggest god was the sun god. His name was Ra, and Pharaoh was seen to be the son of that god, making him the most powerful human being, Pharaoh. Moses says, they're going to come to me. They're going to ask me, what's his name? What do I say? And God says, you tell them that I am. My name is I am, which is related to the idea of I will be who I will be. In other words, I'm not limited to just one thing like the gods there are. I will be who I will be. I'm self-existent. I'm creator. I'm sustainer. I'm unchanging. And I will be who I will be. And Moses, I will be with you. I will be with you in this. And I love that God takes Moses' eyes off of himself, off of his own feelings of inadequacy, of his feelings of this is overwhelming, this is too big for me, I'm not ready for this, I'm not prepared enough for this. I mean, you want me to go toe-to-toe with Pharaoh? Are you serious? You want me to lead a couple million people? Are you out of your mind? Go talk to Bob, please, God. And this is ridiculous, And God is taking his eyes off of all of that and putting them on himself. I am. I will be who I will be, and I am with you, Moses. The bigger our view of God is, the smaller and the smaller and the smaller our inadequacies become. The smaller our fears become, the smaller our sense of being overwhelmed, of not feeling ready, the smaller all that becomes, the bigger God gets. And Moses just kind of finishes this off by rattling off a few excuses of why he doesn't want to do this. And even though God has made it so clear that he's going to be with him, and God just reiterates over and over to him as Moses comes up with these excuses, excuse after excuse after excuse, maybe like we kind of do too. And God says, I'm with you, and I'm with you, and I'm with you. In chapter 4, verse 1, Moses said, but suppose they do not believe me or listen to me, but say, the Lord did not appear to you. So Moses comes up with this brilliant excuse and just says, God, but what if? What if? What if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me? And God says, Moses, I'm with you. Throw your staff down. It becomes a snake. Pick it up. It goes back to a staff. Put your hand, put it in your shirt. He takes it out. It's covered with leprosy. God's like, are you listening to me now? No, puts it back in, goes back to normal. It does all these miracles and says, look, my power, I'm with you, Moses. I'm with you. I know that we can always come up with what ifs. We can come up with, well, what if they don't listen? What if I'm not who I think I am? What if you're wrong and I don't really have identity well-roundedness? I really do have identity jacked upness and I'm just a mess. What if the fact that I'm a fugitive on the run for murder, what if that catches up to me when I go back now? What if I fail and I just don't do this ginormous task you're calling me to? God, what if? What if? And God says, and I'm with you. And whatever your what ifs are to what God is calling you to or will call you to, whatever your what if questions are or excuses are to how you don't want to influence and impact the people that God's calling you to, just know this, that God is with you and he's with me in all of our what if scenarios. And Moses then says, a few verses later in verse 10, Moses said, oh, my Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor even now that you've spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. Basically, Moses is just saying, even though you've told me everything to say, you spelled it all out. When I say it, God, I'm going to mess it all up. In other words, God, I can't do this. I can't do this. I don't have, remember how we talked about, talents and strengths and stuff? Moses is basically saying, God, I don't have enough talent for this. I don't have enough strengths for this. I don't have enough gifting for this. Like, God, I don't know what went wrong here, but you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy. I can't do this. And God says to Moses, Moses, I'm with you. I made your mouth. I'll give you speech. I'll tell you what to say. I'm with you in this. You will complete this. You'll finish it, not just because I've prepared you and all that, which you think you're not prepared enough for, but I'm with you. in this. And God's with us when we come up with all of our reasons, all of our excuses of why we think we can't do what God is calling us to do. In Moses, then, he just kind of runs out of excuses, so he ends with one last-ditch effort. In verse 13, he says, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." That's the verse. he's like, "Okay, God, you won the whole argument and everything here, but oh, my Lord, please send someone else." I love it. I mean, Moses is like, "Okay, fine, but look, here's the deal. I'll just cut to the guy. I don't want to go. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. There's too much at stake." Maybe that cost that we talked about. Remember, calling comes with a cost. The cost, it's too high, God. I don't want to do it. Please, he's just 2 doors down. He's in the back room. His name's Bob. Please, God, please. I don't want to do this. And God says, "Moses, no. You're my guy for this. I'll send Aaron with you so you don't have to go alone, but you're going to this." And listen to me. Here's the thing. This is what I love about this last point. Whatever God is calling you to, whoever God is calling you to lead and influence, that's not for someone else. It's for you. God's calling you to influence people. God's calling you to lead in the ways that he wants you to lead. And he knows who Bob is and all that stuff and what he can do. He's calling you. Don't pass off. Don't hand off to someone else what God is calling you to do. It's for you. I mean, what if Moses would have just said, "No, I'm not going to do it"? What if Peter, when God went to Peter and said, "Peter, you're my rock, and on you I'm going to build my church"? What if Peter said, "You got the wrong guy. I'm not doing it"? What if Joshua, when Moses passes off the baton to Joshua says, "No, you got the wrong guy"? What if Jesus would have said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to the cross. It's too much. The cost is too great. I'm not going to do it. What if? What ramifications, what impact would have those things had? But what if whatever God is calling you to, what if you say yes? What if you say yes to what God is calling you to? Not someone else, not the person sitting next to you, but God is calling you. And instead of passing it off, you say yes. God, yes, I'll do it. What impact, what ramifications will that have on other people? See, God has prepared you for what he wants you to do. He's prepared you uniquely in a different way from anyone else, and he's with you.